yeah, revivingcreation.org is my website. It has sermons. I mean, if ever your clergy say, I don't know how to preach about climate change, there are like almost 100 sermons. Just do little drop-down menu sermons about creation care. Steal them, reuse blog posts, articles, books. Well, it's been amazing also to see all the range of good ideas that have just bubbled up. There's so much wisdom in the room, and it brings to mind a quote by Edward, I think his name is Edward Everett Hale, who said, "I am only one, but still I am one. I cannot do everything, but still I can do something. And because I cannot do everything, I will not refuse to do the something that I can do." Love that one. And you never know, women think that little thing that we have to offer. I always think of that story of Jesus and feeding the 5,000, when there's that little, everyone's hungry, and at the end of the day, everyone's tired. Where's the food? And the boy offers his loaves of fishes. It's just a little bit of peanut butter lunch, puts it in Jesus' hands, and somehow that creates the miracle that feeds everyone. So I love that as a symbolic story about the power of just offer your gift, whatever it is. You may think it is so small. Who am I? I don't have much to offer. You offer it. You put it in Jesus' hands, and you never know what blessing will come. You may know nothing about it, but we just trust that through Jesus there will be blessings. So I thought what I'd do tonight is just offer a few comments, and then I want to end by telling a story. So the comments are, there's a Christian writer named William Barclay who says there are two great days in a person's life: the day you were born and the day you discover why. Why was I born? The day you discover why. So I don't know the particulars of each person's vocation and call and destiny, but I do believe that at this decisive moment in history, we all share a call to take part in whatever way fits with us and our sphere of influence and our skills and our gifts. We are all called to take part in what Thomas Berry calls the great work of moving from a deathly society to a life-sustaining and liberating and loving society. And I would point out that today is All Saints' Day. And if you want to sort of pick a vocation to have, I can't think of a better vocation than to be a good ancestor. Like, let's all aim to be good ancestors so that our descendants, and people who may never know us, but somehow they look back on us with gratitude. Like, I am so grateful that there were those folks in that kind of scary moment in 2019, 2020. Like, are we going to choose life or are we going to choose death? Like, which way is it going to go? And I'm so grateful for all those people. Thank you for my ancestors who chose life. And may we be such ancestors. We've talked before about we live in a time when a lot of things are dying. And sometimes I feel as if our role is to be hospice chaplains. Sometimes I feel as if we are at the bedside of the dying, and our role is to be like a good chaplain where you keep company and you ease pain and you share love all the way to the end. So that to me is one evocative image of our role as communities of faith at this time in history. But I also want to say, I think we also can be midwives. We can be the people who keep our eyes on the new, beautiful future that is coming toward us, a future that is more just, more sustainable, more gentle, more kind. Everybody's included, the earth is included. Let's live our lives as if we are midwives to that future, because it really begins right here with us. There are those who say that the church is made for a time like this. This is why we are here as church. And one thing I'm glad about the climate emergency is I think it's beginning to heal that false split between people who are spiritual and people who are the activists. that split where, okay, I have to pick. Okay, I'm either the kind of person who I like to pray, and maybe I journal, maybe I'm a spiritual director, and I go to church, and it's all about my soul, the spiritual people. And then there are the activists, the people who are out there trying to change systems and policies, or trying to serve, or create some bold action. And I think now is a really good time to heal that split, because we need activists who are rooted in prayer. And we need people who are rooted in prayer, who are bringing the world's concerns into their prayer. We need to find ways to weave ourselves, our communities together. We need people who are both prayer people and people who are active people. I also want to say that we're often told that we're supposed to be good stewards. Good stewards, that's kind of a familiar word. And there are times when I feel like, honestly, for me, the word feels too wimpy. As if being a good steward, it just gives me the sense of I'm a good steward if I remember to turn off the lights, or if I recycle a can. That makes me a good steward. I somehow want to invent other language for our possible role.
Correct.
Like what about sacred activist? Or spiritual warrior, or I'm just trying to imagine some vocabulary that has a little more oomph to it. So it's not just about kind of going along with business as usual, but I'll just clean up a couple things. No, it's more about mobilizing our whole selves and our communities to rise to the occasion. So I've been talking about an awakened and broken and radiant heart, and I want to thank you for all the ways that you already are cultivating an awakened heart and accepting a broken heart and manifesting a radiant heart. There is so much wisdom in this room, and I'm sensing there's even more energy and life coming forward. I happen to have the title of Missioner for Creation Care, but really each one, I hold the title on your behalf, really. So really each one of you is a missioner for creation care, and if I could, I'm commissioning you. You get to be a missioner for creation care too, in your own world, in your own way, whatever that will look like. But my dream would be that you would take that on as that's important to you too. That's part of your identity as well. So those are my comments. And I'm going to end by telling a story. And it's a story about what it was like to be arrested for the first time. And I want to say up front that I recognize that people have different political affiliations, and that there are good and faithful Christians who belong to different political parties. So you and I may or may not have the same political beliefs. That's fine. The point of the story is to invite us to think about what are the issues for which I would be willing to break the law. Under what conditions, with what support, can I imagine myself saying, this situation is so unjust, it's so radically unjust, that I'm willing publicly and peacefully to break the law for the sake of bearing witness to the love of God. So that's kind of the question I pose as I read this little story. It was, I'll do the setup. It was published in an anthology of essays called Heaven, edited by Roger Furlow, which came out a number of years ago. And the setup for the story is, it was in 2000, that presidential election where we were in suspense. You remember that for a number of days?
We're in Florida.
You remember that with the hanging chads? Oh my God. Oh yeah. So it began in 2000 with that suspense, and you can probably guess who my candidate was. I voted for Al Gore. I read Inconvenient Truth, and I really was voting for Al Gore. I knew that George Bush wanted to drill for oil in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, and I knew that the Episcopal Church has a long history of opposing any intervention, any assault on the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge. So I remember going outside one evening just to get my hands in the dirt. We had this little garden, and I just said, I'm going to put the garden to bed. I'm going to sort of take down the old tomato plants, just to kind of calm myself down with the earth. And I remember standing in my little garden, thinking about the caribou, because you know there are those huge migrations of caribou across that plain. And I was imagining, you know, there are caribou that are standing out there with the same kind of suspense that I'm standing here in my little garden in the Boston area. So I'm waiting with the caribou. And then we heard the results of the election, and soon after that I heard about a new interfaith group that was called Religious Witness for the Earth. And it was planning to go to Washington, D.C., to the Department of Energy. It was going to have a day of lobbying, no, first a day of educating ourselves about fossil fuels and about the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, then a day of lobbying, and then a day of doing civil disobedience. And I sort of tucked that away, like, I'm so not the type, you know, I don't get arrested. But I just noted that, and I sort of tucked it away. Well, we went through the 40 days of Lent. And then during Holy Week, like all of us, I followed Jesus through his vigil and arrest and his trial and his crucifixion. And eventually we got to the Easter Vigil service that Saturday night, and we heard the proclamation, Hallelujah, Christ is risen, and we heard the gospel story of, you know, it was the gospel where the angel is sitting on the stones were rolled away, and there's an angel sitting on top of the stone. And the preacher was Stephen Charleston. Oh yes. Yeah, so Bishop Stephen Charleston was our preacher, and he said, tonight we're going to move some stones. He said there is a stone on everybody's tomb. Everybody has a stone on their tomb, and tonight we're going to move some stones. So what is the stone on your tomb? It could be a stone of some kind of financial concern or worry. It could be the stone of health, or something's happening with your health or the health of a loved one. It could be the stone of a relationship that's going south and there's some struggle or difficulty in your life, or diagnosis or death. What's the stone? What's your stone? So I'm kind of doing an inventory, and I can't actually think of anything. My life is doing well, it's fine, and I feel like I'm the only person on the planet who has no stone on their tomb. And just then, this thing kind of rolls and plants itself in front of me, like this huge boulder. And I thought, what the heck is that? And I realized it was the environmental crisis. And it was not only the environmental crisis, it was my own despair about the environmental crisis. It was my own sense of hopelessness. It's too late, we're too far gone, we're cooked, what can I possibly do? And I realized if I want to bear witness to the Christ who rolls away the stone, and who says that life and not death will have the last word, I needed to get myself down to Washington, D.C. and be part of this action. So I later told Stephen Charleston that he preached me into jail. Thanks a lot. But it tells me something about the power of preaching, because preaching has power. So that's the part I want to read. We went down to DC and we did the education, we did the lobbying, and then about 100 of us, very, very interfaith, everyone wearing all different colors of clothing and garb, and everyone's dressed up in their sort of religious clothes. So we're carrying these enormous banners and we're singing, and we are processing down Independence Avenue, about 100 of us. The police knew we were coming. When we got to the Department of Energy, which is this enormous stone structure, and it was surrounded by police. We held a brief worship service, and all this was legal. All this was legal. And then I want to read the part where it was not legal. I'll just read a little bit. The worship service was coming to an end. We sang Amazing Grace, and then the 22 of us who had decided to risk arrest joined hands and walked slowly to the doors of the Department of Energy. I felt us cross an invisible boundary. With the others, I stepped over a threshold I could not see. I walked out of my ordinary life. I am neither a lawbreaker nor a thrill seeker. More often than not, I follow the rules. I even enforce them. I fasten my seatbelt. I don't cheat on taxes. I write thank you notes. I stand up when the band plays our national anthem. But here I was, intentionally and publicly breaking the law. As if some inner revolution had quietly taken place, the old me was no longer in charge. Whatever security I felt in operating within the rules was gone. That's partly why I felt so frightened as I left the safety of the circle and moved toward the door. I hardly recognized myself. I hardly knew who I was. We stand or kneel in prayer, our backs to the building. The pavement under my knees is hard. At home, I often sit on a meditation cushion to pray, but today there is no cushion, just the weight of my body against stone. I lift up my hands. I'm dressed for Holy Communion. I might as well hold out my arms as I do at communion. Instead of pews filled with parishioners, I see ranks of police and a cluster of supporters. I'm afraid. I have never been arrested before. Years ago, as a Vista volunteer in Mayor Rizzo's Philadelphia, I heard countless stories of police brutality. It's not that I really expect the same thing to happen to me. The punch in the gut, the assault behind closed doors. Still, my body tenses as I place myself against the cops, the feds, the law. I close my eyes. One by one, we pray aloud, words thrown into space, words hurled against stone. Is this whole thing ridiculous? I briefly open my eyes and notice a well-dressed man watching us. He strokes his tie, leans over, and says something to a fellow nearby. The two of them chuckle. I have no idea what they're talking about, but I wonder if they think we look absurd. I suppose we do. Here we are with our jerry-rigged signs, our predictably earnest songs and prayers of protest, a foolhardy band straight out of the 60s. Defensively, I imagine confronting that mocking man with the arsenal of our credentials. We're no ragtag bunch, I want to tell him. We're people with doctorates and master's degrees, nurses and ministers, writers and accountants, thoughtful people, educated people, professionals. I am distracted from prayer by this indignant outburst. Let it go, wisdom tells me. None of that matters. Your degrees, your skills, your status in the world, the privileges of race and class mean nothing now. You are a woman on your knees. That is who you are. One human being pleading with God. I turn my attention back to prayer and continue to stretch out my arms. Suddenly, I realize that behind the tension, behind the fear and self-consciousness, something else is welling up. I am jubilant. Lift up your hearts, I might as well be saying to the people before me, beaming as broadly as I do at communion. We lift them to the Lord, would come the response. How did I miss it? After years of going to church, after years of celebrating communion, only now, as I kneel on pavement and face a phalanx of cops, do I understand so clearly that praising God can be an act of political resistance, that worship is an act of human liberation. The 22 of us come from different faith traditions, but each of us is rooted in a reality that transcends the rules and structures of this world. Tap into that transcendent truth. Let the divine longing for a community of justice and mercy become your own deepest longing. And who knows what energy for life will be released. I feel as defiant as a maple seedling that pushes up through asphalt. It is God I love and God's green earth. I want to bear witness to that love even in the face of hatred or indifference, even if the cost is great. So what if our numbers are small? So what if in the eyes of the police and the eyes of the world, we have no power? I'm beginning to sense the power that is ours to wield. The power of self-offering. We may have nothing else, but we do have this, the power to say, this is where I stand. This is what I love. Here is something for which I'm willing to put my body on the line. I never knew that stepping beyond the borders of what I find comfortable could make me so happy, that shifting from self-preservation to self-offering could awaken so much joy. So, as always, I have some questions to leave with you. I invite you first just to take a moment to remember a time when you took a brave step toward fullness of life, a time when you made a decision to do the right thing, even though you knew it would be difficult or costly. Who inspires you to be bolder than you thought? With whom do you hold hands, literally or figuratively, when you step out to make a difference in the world? And if you knew you could not fear, if you knew you could not fail, if you knew you could not fail, and if you were set free from fear, what would you do for the healing of our world? Thanks.
Reveal to me a melody to glorify your name, to glorify your name forever. Reveal to me a melody to glorify your name, to glorify your name forever, in company of angels. We will glorify your name, we'll glorify